Chapter 16. In Nero's Palace. Upon leaving Phaon, Beric was conducted to the room where he had left Scopus. The latter at once joined him, and without asking any questions left the palace with him. "I would ask nothing until you were outside," Scopus said. "They were wondering there at the long audience you have had with Nero. Judging by the gravity of your face, things have not gone well with you." "They have gone well in one sense," Beric said, "though I would vastly rather they had gone otherwise. I feel very much more fear now than when I stood awaiting the attack of the lion." And he then related to Scopus the conversation he had had with Nero. The Lannister inclined himself humbly to the ground. "You are a great man now, Beric, though, as you say, the place is not without its dangers. I guessed when Caesar sent for you that he purposed to use your strength and courage in his service. Your face is one that invites trust, and Nero was wise enough to see that if he were to trust you he must trust you altogether. He has acted wisely. He deemed that, having no friends and connections in Rome, he could rely upon you as he could rely upon no one who is a native here. You will be a great man for a time at any rate. I would rather have remained at your ludus, Scopus. I should feel like a little dog I saw the other day in a cage of one of the lions. The beast seemed fond of it, but the little creature knew well that at any moment the lion might stretch out its paw and crush it." Scopus nodded. "That is true enough, Beric, though there are tens of thousands in Rome who would gladly run the risk for the sake of the honour and profit. Still, as I said to you before we started, I have faith in your good fortune and quickness, and believe that you may escape from the bars when another would lose his skin. Tell to none but myself what Caesar has said to you. The world will soon guess that your post as private librarian is but a pretext for Caesar to have you near him. It is not by such a post that the victor of the arena would be rewarded." They now went together to a goldsmith. "Ah, Scopus, I have been expecting you. I saw you in the arena with your two gladiators. Afterwards I saw this tall young Briton fight the lion. When I heard that he was at your ludus, I said to myself, Scopus will be bringing him to me to dispose of some of the jewellery to which the ladies were so prodigal. That is our errand, Rufus. Here is the bag." The goldsmith opened it. "You don't expect me to name a price for all these articles, Scopus? It will take me a day to examine and appraise them, and indeed I shall have to go to a friend or two for money, for there is enough here to stock a shop. Never did I know our ladies so liberal of their gifts." "Ah," Scopus said, "and you don't often see gifts so well deserved. But, mind you, if it had been I who had fought the lion, I who have nothing to recommend me in the way of either stature or looks, it would have been a very different thing. Youth and stature and good looks go for a great deal even in the arena, I can tell you. Well, Beric will call in a day or two. Here is the inventory of the jewels. I have got a copy at home. Do you put the price you will give against each, and then he can sell or not as he pleases. He is not going to sacrifice them, Rufus, for he has no need of money. Caesar has just appointed him to his household." The manner of the jeweller changed at once. "The list shall be ready for you in 2 days," he said to Beric respectfully. "If you have need of money on account now, I can let you have as much as you will." Beric shook his head. "I have all that I require," he said. "I will return. It may be in 2 days, it may be more. I know not precisely how much my duties may occupy me." "You will get full value for your goods," Scopus said when they left the shop. "That was why I mentioned that you had entered Nero's household, for it is a great thing to have a friend in court." "And how about yourself, Scopus? You have kept me and trained me for months. Now you are going to lose my services just when you might begin to get a return. Moreover, I may tell you that I shall as soon as possible get Boduoc with me, so you must name a sum which will amply recompense you for the trouble and expense that you have had with us." "I shall be no loser, Beric. When captives in war are sent to be trained in a ludus, The Lannister is paid for a year's keep and tuition for them. After that he makes what he can from those who gave entertainments. Therefore I receive from the imperial treasury the regular amount for you and your comrades. Moreover, the senator who gave the performance sent me a very handsome sum, more than he had agreed to give me for Porus and Lupus together, saying that although he had not engaged you, your deeds in the arena had delighted the people beyond measure, and that as his show would be talked about for years, it was but fair that he should pay your Lannister a sum worthy of the performance. And now farewell. You know that I and your comrades at the Ludus will always be glad to see you. We shall be back in Rome as soon as my place is rebuilt. You may be sure that I will come, Scopus. You have shown me much kindness, and if in any way I can repay you, I will do so. Tell Boduoc I hope very shortly to have him with me, and that maybe I shall be able to find means of withdrawing the others from the arena." As soon as they separated, Beric walked rapidly to the house where Norbanus had taken up his abode. As he reached the door he paused, for he heard within the sounds of wailing, and felt that he had come too late. "Tell Norbanus," he said to the slave at the door, "that Beric is here, but that unless he wishes to see me I will leave him undisturbed, as I fear by the cries that the lady Ennia is dead." "She died early this morning," the slave said. "I will tell my master that you are here." He returned almost directly. "Norbanus prays you to enter," he said, and led the way to the magistrate's study. "Ah, my friend," the Roman said, "it is over. Ennia died this morning. She passed away as if in sleep. It is a terrible grief to me. Thanks to the gods I can bear that as becomes a Roman, but how would it have been had I seen her torn to pieces under my eyes? Ah, Beric, you know not from what you have saved us. We could never have lifted up our heads again had she died so. Now we shall grieve for her as all men grieve for those they love, but it will be a great grief without pain, for assuredly she died happy. She spoke of you once or twice, and each time she said, 'I shall see him again.' I think she was speaking her belief that she should meet you after death. The Christian belief in a future state is like yours, you know, Beric, rather than like ours." "She was a gentle creature," Beric said, "and as she dared even death by the lions for her god, assuredly she will go to the Happy Island, though it may not be the same that the Druids tell us Britons of. And how are the ladies Lesbia and Aemilia?" "My wife is well," the magistrate said. "She has not the consolations of philosophy as I have, but I think that she feels it is better for the child herself that she should have so died. Ennia would always have remained a Christian, and fresh troubles and persecutions would have come. Besides, her religion would have put her apart from her mother and her family. To me, of course, it would have made no difference, holding the views that I do as to the religions of the world, but my wife sees things in a different light. Aemilia is worn out with watching and grief, but I know that she will see you presently, that is, if you are not compelled to return at once to the hills." "I return there no more. I have seen Nero today, and he has appointed me an official in his household. It will seem ridiculous to you when I say that I am to be his private librarian. That, of course, is but a pretext to keep me near his person, deeming that I am strong enough to be a useful guard to him, and being a stranger am not likely to be engaged in any intrigue that may be going on. I would rather have remained at the Ludus for a time, but there is no refusing the offers of an emperor, and he spoke to me fairly, and I answered him as one man should do another, frankly and openly." "Nero has done wisely," Norbanus said warmly, "though for you the promotion is perilous. To be Nero's friend is to be condemned beforehand to death, though for a time he may shower favours upon you. He is fickle and inconstant, and you have not learned to cringe and flatter, and are as likely as not to anger him by your outspoken utterances." "I shall assuredly say what I think if he questions me," Beric said quietly. "But if he values me as a god, he will scarce question me when he knows that I should express an opinion contrary to his own. When do you enter his service, Beric?" "I am to present myself tomorrow morning." "Then you will stay with us tonight, Beric. This is a house of mourning, and you are as one of ourselves. You must excuse ceremony, for I have many arrangements to make, as Ennia will be buried tomorrow." "I will go out into the garden," Beric said. "Do so. I will send up word to Aemilia that you are here. Doubtless she would rather meet you there than before the slaves." Beric had been sitting in the shade for half an hour when he saw Aemilia coming towards him. Her face was swollen with crying, and tears were still streaming down her cheeks. Beric took her hand and would have bent over it, when she grasped his with both of hers and pressed it to her lips. "Oh, Beric," she cried, "what have you not done for us? How much do we not owe you? Had it not been for you I should be mourning now, not for Ennia, who lies with a smile on her face in her chamber, but for Ennia torn to pieces and devoured by the lion. It seems to me that I too should die when suddenly you stood between her and the fierce beast, seeming to my eyes as if a god had come down to save her, and when all the people gave you up as lost, standing there unarmed and calmly waiting the lion's attack. I felt that you would conquer. Truly Ennia's god and yours must have stood beside you, though I saw them not. How else could you have been so strong and fearless? Ennia thought so too. She told me so one night when the house was asleep, and I only watching beside her. My God was with him, she said. None other could have given him the strength to battle with the lion. He will bring him to himself in good time, and I shall meet him again. She said something about you knowing that she was a Christian, but of course you could not have known that." "I did know it, Aemilia," and Beric then told her of his meeting with Ennia and the girl and the old slave when they were attacked by the plunderers on the way home from their place of meeting. "She promised me not to go again," he said, "without letting me know, in which case I should have escorted her and protected her from harm. But just after that there was the fire, and I had to go away with Scopus to the Olman hills, and so, as she knew that I could not escort her, I never heard from her. I would that I had been taken with her that night she was arrested, then she might not have fallen into the hands of the guard. Indeed, had I been there I would have gone gladly, for it seemed to me there must be something strange in the religion that would induce a quiet, gentle girl like her to go out at night unknown to her parents. Now I desire even more to learn about it. Her God must surely have given her the strength and courage that she showed when she chose death by lions rather than deny him." "I, too, should like to know something about it," Aemilia said. "By the way, Ennia spoke when she said you knew that she was a Christian. It seemed to me that, if you did know, which I thought was impossible, she thought you were angry with her for becoming a Christian." "I was angry with her not for being a Christian, but for going out without your father's knowledge, and I told her so frankly. If it had been you I should not have been so much surprised, because you have high spirits and are fearless in disposition, but for her to do so seemed so strange and unnatural that I deemed this religion of hers must be bad in that it taught a girl to deceive her parents." "What did she say, Beric?" "I could see that she considered it her duty beyond all other duties, and so said no more, knowing nothing of her religion beyond what your father told me." "I wish Pollio had been here," the girl said. "He would have thought as I do about the loss of Ennia. My father has his philosophy, and considers it rather a good thing to be out of the world, My mother was so horrified when she heard that Ennia was a Christian that I am sure she is relieved at her death. I am not a philosopher, and it was nothing to me whether Ennia took up with this new sect or not, so you see I have no one who can sympathize with me. You can't think how dreadful the thought is that I shall be alone in future." "We grow accustomed to all things," Beric said. "I have lost all my relations, my country, and everything, and I am here a stranger and a little better than a slave, and yet life seems not so unpleasant to me. In time the grief will be healed, and you will be happy again." "I am sure I should never have been happy, Beric, if she had died in the arena. I should always have had it before my eyes. I should have dreamt of it. But why do you say that until today you had been almost a slave? Why is it different today?" Beric told her of his new position. "If I could take your position and have your strength but for one night," Aemilia said passionately, "I would slay the tyrant. He was a monster. It is to him that Ennia's death is due. He has committed unheard of crimes, and he will kill you too, Beric. He kills all those whom he once favours." "I shall be on my guard, Aemilia. Besides, my danger will not be great, for he will have nothing to gain by my death. I shall keep aloof from all intrigues, and he will have no reason to suspect me. The danger, if danger there be, will come from my refusing to carry out any of his cruel orders. I am ready to be a guard, but not an executioner." "I know how it will end," the girl sighed, "but I shall hope always. You conquered the lion, maybe you will conquer Nero, who is a very much less imposing creature." Beric smiled. A slave girl at this moment summoned Aemilia into the house. She waited a moment. "Remember, Beric," she said, "that if trouble and danger come upon you, any such poor aid as I can give will be yours. I am a Roman girl. I have not the strength to fight as you have, but have the courage to die, and as, at the risk of your life, you saved Ennia for us, so would I risk my life to save yours. Remember that a woman can plot and scheme, and that in dealing with Nero cunning goes for as much as strength. We have many relatives and friends here too, and Ennia's death in the arena would have been viewed as a disgrace upon the whole family, so that I can rely upon help from them if need be. Remember that, should the occasion arise, I shall feel your refusal of my help much more bitterly than any misfortune your acceptance of it could bring upon me." Then turning, the girl went up to the house. On arriving at Nero's palace the next morning and asking for Phaon, Beric was at once conducted to his chamber. "That is well," the freedman said as he entered. "Nero is in council with his architects at present. I will show you to your chamber at once, so that you will be in readiness." The apartment to which Phaon led Beric was a charming one. It had no windows in the walls, which were covered with exquisitely painted designs, but light was given by an opening in the ceiling, under which, in the centre of the room, was the shallow basin into which the rain that penetrated through the opening fell. There were several elegantly carved couches round the room, some bronze statues stood on plinths, and some pots of tall aquatic plants stood in the basin, heavy hangings covering the entrance. "Here," Phaon said, drawing one of them aside, "is your cubicle, and here next to it is another. It is meant for a friend of the occupant of the room, but I should not advise you to have anyone sleep here. Nero would not sleep well did he know that any stranger was so close to his apartment. This and the entrance at the other end of the room lead into passages, while this," and he drew back another curtain, "is the library." This room was about the same size as that allotted to Beric, being some 25 feet square. Short as the notice had been, a wooden framework of cedar wood, divided into partitions 15 inches each way, had been erected round, and in each of these stood a wooden case containing rolls of manuscripts. the name of the work being indicated by a label affixed to the box. Seated at a table in one of the angles was the Greek Chilton, who saluted Beric. "We shall be good friends, I hope," Beric said, "for I shall have to rely upon you entirely for the Greek books, and it is you who will be the real librarian." Chilton was a man of some 30 years of age, with a pale Greek face, and looking at him earnestly, Beric thought that it looked an honest one. He had anticipated that the man Nero had chosen would be placed as a spy over him, but he now concluded this was not so, and that Nero at present trusted him entirely. "This passage," Phaon said, "leads direct to Caesar's private apartment. Few steps only separate them. The passage on this side of your room also leads there, so that either from here or from it you can be summoned at once. Now let us return to your room. It is from there that you will generally go to Nero when he summons you. The door at the end of the short passage will not be kept locked, while this one from the library cannot be opened from your side. 3 strokes of Nero's bell will be your signal that he requires you. If after the 3 have sounded there is another stroke smartly, you will snatch up your sword and rush in instantly, by night or day." "What are my duties to be?" Beric asked when they had returned to his room, "for Chilton can discharge those of librarian infinitely better than I can do." "You will sit and read here, or pass the time as you like, until 9 o'clock, at which hour Nero goes to the baths. At 11 he goes out to inspect the works or to take part in public ceremonies. At 3 he sups, and the meal lasts sometimes till 7 or 8, sometimes until midnight. Your duties in the library will end when he goes to the baths, and after that you will be free, unless he summons you to attend him abroad, until supper is concluded. At night you will draw back the curtains between the passage and your room and that of your cubicle, so that you may hear his summons, or even his voice if loudly raised. You will lie down with your sword ready at hand. I should say your duties will begin at 6 in the morning, and it is only between that hour and 9 that you will be a prisoner in the library." "I shall not find it an imprisonment," Beric said. 3 hours is little enough to study, with all that wealth of books ready at hand. How about Chilton?" "He will be on duty whenever the emperor is in the palace. Beyond that he is free to go where he likes, so that he be ready at all times to produce any book Nero may call for. Your meals will be brought up to you by your attendant from the imperial kitchen. There are, you know, baths in the palace for the use of the officials. You will find in this chest a supply of garments of all kinds suitable for different occasions, and here in the cubicle ready to hand are a sword and dagger, with a helmet, breastplate, and shield, to be worn only when Caesar desires you to accompany him armed. If there is anything else that you require, you have but to give the order to your attendant, who will obtain it from the steward of the palace." At this moment a slave drew aside the hanging. "Caesar expects you, Beric." Nero was standing at the top of the steps into the garden when Beric entered. "Walk with me, Beric," he said. "For 3 hours I have been going into the affairs of the city and hearing letters read from the governors of the provinces. It will be a change to talk of other things. Tell me about this Briton of yours. I know about your wars. Tell me of your life at home." Beric at once complied. He saw that it was not information about religion and customs that the emperor desired to hear, but talk about simple matters that would distract his thoughts from the cares of state. He talked then of his native village, of his mother with her maids at work around her, of hunting expeditions as a boy with Boduoc, and how both had had a narrow escape of being devoured by wolves. Nero listened in silence as they strolled under the deep shade of the trees. At times he hardly seemed to be listening, but occasionally he asked a question that showed he was following what Beric said. "Your talk is like a breath from the snow-clad mountains," he said at last, "or a cup of cold water to a thirsty traveller. The word Romans never occurred in it, and yet it was in our tongue. You were brought up among us, as I heard. Tell me about that." Briefly, Beric described his life at Camalodunum. "It is a strange mixture," Nero said, "the cultivated Roman and the wild Briton. I understand now better than I did before. You are risking your life for the Christian girl in the arena. You did not love her?" "No, Caesar. We Britons do not think of marriage until we are at least 25. We hold that young marriages deteriorate a race. Ennia was little more than a child according to our notions. She was scarce 16, and when I saw her before, for a few days only, she was a year younger. But I think that I should have done the same had I never seen her before. We Britons, like the Gauls, hold women in high respect, and I think that a few of my people would hesitate to risk their lives to save a helpless woman." "I think we are all for self here," Nero said, "but we can admire what we should not think of imitating. I like you, Beric, because you are so different from myself and from all around me. We are products of Rome, you of the forest. Every man here sighs for power or wealth, or lives for pleasure. I as much as any. We suffer none to stand in our way, but trample down remorselessly all who hinder us. As to risking our lives for the sake of a woman, and that woman almost a stranger, such an idea would never so much as occur to us. This is not the only girl you have saved. I received a letter from Caius Muro some months ago saying that the news had come to him in Syria that Beric, the young chief of the Iceni, who had so long withstood Suetonius, had been brought a prisoner to Rome, and he besought me, should Beric still be alive, to show favour to him, as he had saved his little daughter when all others had been slain at the sack of Camalodunum, and that he had ridden her away until after the defeat of Boadicea, and had then sent her safe and unarmed back to the Romans. The matter escaped my mind till now, though, in truth, I bade my secretary write to him to say that I would befriend you. But it is strange that, having so much life and spirit in that great body of yours, you should yet hold life so cheaply. It was the way with our forefathers, but it is not so now. Perhaps because our life is more pleasant than theirs was. Tell me, has Phaon done all to make you comfortable? Is there aught else that you should wish? If so, speak freely." "There is one thing I should like, Caesar. I should like to have with me my follower Boduoc, he who was the companion of my boyhood, who fought with me in that hut against the wolves, and was ever by my side in the struggling among the fens. I ask this partly for my own sake, and partly that I may the better do the duty you have set me of acting as your guard. The air of palaces is heavy, and men wake not from sleep as when they lie down in the forest and carry their lives in their hands. I might not hear your call, but with him with me we could keep alternate watch through the night, and the slightest sounds would reach our ears. We could even take post close to the hangings on your chamber, just as the Praetorian guard all the avenues on the other side. I might even go further. There was 20 of my countrymen brought hither with me. All are picked men, not one but in strength and courage is my equal. I would say, place them in offices in the palace, make them doorkeepers, or place some of them here as labourers under your gardeners. Then at all times you would have under your orders a body of 20 devoted men who would escort you in safety though half Rome was in tumult. They would sleep together among the slaves, where I could instantly summon them. I can answer for their fidelity. They would follow me to the death against any foe I bade them attack." "It is an excellent idea, Beric, and shall be carried out. They were all sent to the Lodi, if I mistake not, and will have skill as well as strength and courage. I will bid my secretary send an order for their discharge, and that they present themselves to Phaon tomorrow. He will find occupations for them, and I myself will bid him so dispose of them that they shall be well satisfied with their appointments. Truly, as you say, a guard of 20 gladiators of your strength and courage might well defend me against a host. Now it is time that I went in my bath." Upon the following day the British captives were all disposed as doorkeepers in the palace. Beric was present when they presented themselves for Phaon, and had afterwards a private interview with them. They were delighted at finding that they were again under his leadership. All hated as much as ever the occupation of gladiator, although only the man who had defeated Lupus had as yet appeared in the arena. "Your duties will be simple and easy," Beric said. "You will only have to see that no strangers pass you without authority. Each of you will have one or more attendants with you, who will take the names of those who present themselves to those whom they wish to see, and will, on bringing an authorization for them to pass, escort them to the person with whom they have business. Of course the orders will be different at different posts, but these you will receive from the officials of the chamberlain. You will be on duty, as I learned, for 6 hours each day, and will for the rest of the time be free to go where you please. I suppose by this time all of you have learned sufficient Latin to converse freely. Remember that at 9 o'clock in the evening you must all be in the palace. Phaon has arranged for an apartment that you will occupy together. There you will keep your arms and be always ready, when you receive a message from me, to attend. Prepare for fighting. There is one thing more. Do not mingle with the Romans more than you can help. Listen to no tales relating to the emperor, and let no man discuss with you any question of state. Everything that is done in the palace is known, and were you seen talking with any man who afterwards fell under the suspicion of Nero, it might cost you your lives. Remember that, whatever may be the duties assigned to you here, we are really assembled as a sort of special bodyguard to him. He is our general. It is no business of ours what his private acts may be. It may be that he is cruel to the powerful and wealthy, but on the other hand he spends his money lavishly on the people of Rome, and is beloved of them. If they, as Romans do, not resent his acts towards senators and patricians, it is no business of ours, strangers and foreigners here, to meddle in the matter. It may be that in time, if we do our duty well, Nero may permit us to return to Britain." There is a murmur of approval. "Nero may cut off the head of every man in Rome for what I care," Boduoc said. "I owe nothing to the Romans. They are all our enemies, from the highest to the lowest, and if Nero is disposed to be our friend he can do what he likes with them. But I do wish he had given us something more to do than to hang about his palace." 6 months passed. Beric stood high in favour with Nero. 2 or 3 times, in order to test the vigilance of his guard, he had sounded his bell. On each occasion an armed figure had instantly entered his room, only to retire when he waved his hand, so that the slave who slept at the other door found Nero alone when he entered, and brought him a cooling drink, or performed some other little office that served as an excuse for his summons. The emperor, being well aware how great would be the jealousy of the Praetorian Guard were a report to reach them that Caesar had guards save themselves, Beric often followed in the train of the emperor when he went abroad, and as it speedily became known that he was a favourite of Nero, his friendship was eagerly sought by those who frequented the court, and his good offices solicited by those who had requests to make of the emperor. Large sums of money had been sometimes offered him for his good offices, but he steadily refused to accept any presents whatever, or to mingle in the affairs of others, except in the very occasional cases where it seemed to him that those who sought his aid had been cruelly and unfairly dealt with by officials or venal magistrates. The sale of his jewels had brought him a large sum of money, which he had placed in the hands of Norbanus, and the handsome appointments Nero had assigned to his office were very much more than sufficient for his wants. He was always a welcome guest at the house of Norbanus, and now that he was an official high in favour with Nero, even Lesbia received him with marked courtesy. The conversation always turned, when the ladies were present, upon general topics. The gossip of society in Rome, news from the provinces, and other similar matters, for Beric begged them not to speak of the serious events of the day. I am one of Nero's guards, and I do not want to have to hate my work, or to wish well to those from whom I am bound to protect him. To me he is kind and friendly. At times, when I am with him in the garden or alone in his room, he talks to me as an equal, of books and art, the condition of the people, and other topics. It seems to me that there are two Neros, the one a man such as he was when he ascended the throne, gentle, inclined to clemency, desirous of the good of his people and of popularity, a lover of beautiful things, passionately devoted to art and all its branches, taking far greater pleasure in the society of a few intimate friends than in the state pageants and ceremonies. There is another Nero. Of him I will not talk. I desire above all things not to know of him. I believe that he has been driven to this war upon many of the best and worthiest in Rome by timidity. He is suspicious. Possibly he has reasons for his suspicions. Possibly they are unfounded. I do not wish to defend him. All this is a matter for you Romans, and not for me. I wish to know nothing about it, to leave all public matters to those they may concern, to shut my eyes and my ears as much as I can to all that goes on around me. It is for that reason that I go so little to other houses save this. I meet those about the court, at the bath, the gymnasium, and in the streets. But at these places men speak not of public affairs. They know not who may be listening, and certainly they would not speak before me. Happily, as I am known to stand high in Caesar's favour, I am the last person to whom they would say aught in his blame. Thus it is that, though sometimes I come, from chance words let fall, to know that proscriptions, accusations, confiscations, and executions take place, that the Christians are still exposed to horrible persecutions and tortures, that a gloom hangs over society, and that no man of wealth and high station can regard himself as safe. It is only a vague rumour of these things that I hear, and by keeping my ears sealed and refusing to learn particulars, to listen to private griefs and individual sufferings, I am still able to feel that I can do my duty to Caesar. Norbanus and Lesbia alike agreed with Beric's reasoning. The former, indeed, himself took but comparatively little interest of what passed around him. On the other hand, absorbed in the politics of the hour, she was connected with many noble families, and knew that a member of these might fall at any moment under Nero's displeasure. To have a friend, then, high in the favour of Nero was a matter of great importance, and she therefore impressed upon all her intimates that when they found Beric at her house they should scrupulously avoid all discussion of public affairs. Chapter 17. Betrothal. Nero had, within a short time of Beric's establishment in the palace, spoken to him of his apprehension of the increasing power of the party who, having reverted to the opinions of the Stoic philosophers, were ever denouncing the luxury and extravagance of modern ways, and endeavouring both by example and precept to reintroduce the simplicity and severity of former times. All this, Nero said angrily, is of course but a cloak under which to attack me. Piso and Plautus, Seneca and Lucan do but assume this severity of matters. They have plotted and intrigued against me. I shall never be safe while they live. Caesar, Beric said gravely, I am but a soldier, but born a free Briton and a chief. I cannot sell my services, but must give it loyally and heartily. You honour me with your favour and confidence. I believe that I am worthy of it. I do not serve you for money. Already I have begged you not to heap presents upon me, Wealth would be useless to me did I desire it. Not only have you offered to bestow estates upon me, but I have learned already that there are many others who, seeing that I am favoured by you, would purchase my friendship or my advocacy by large sums. I should despise myself if I cared for money. You would, I know, honour me not only with your trust that I can be relied upon to do my duty as your guard, but by treating me as one of your confidence in other matters. At the risk, then, of exciting your displeasure and forfeiting your favour, I must again pray you not to burden me with state matters. Of these I know nothing, and I wish to know nothing, save that of Seneca. I scarce know the names of the others of whom you have spoken. I am wholly ignorant of the intrigues of court life, and I seek to know nothing of them, and am therefore in no position to give any opinion on these matters, and did I speak from only partial knowledge I should do these men great wrong. In the next place, Caesar, I am not one who has a double face, and if you ask my opinion of a matter in which I thought that others had ill advised you, I should frankly say that I thought you were wrong, and the truth is never palatable to the great. I try, therefore, to shut my ears to everything that is going on around me, for did I take note of rumours my loyalty to you might be shaken. Perhaps you are right, Nero said after a long pause, but tell me, once and for all, what do you think on general matters? Is it good to have the opinion of one whom I know to be honest? On one subject only are my convictions strong, Caesar. I think that the terrible persecution of the Christians is in itself horrible and contrary to all the traditions of Rome. These are harmless people. They make no disturbances. They do injury to no one. They are guilty of no act that would justify in any way the tortures inflicted upon them. I am not a Christian. I know nothing of their doctrines, but I am unable to understand how one naturally clement and kind-hearted as you are can give way to the clamour of the populace against these people. As to those of whom you speak and others, I have no opinions. But were I Caesar, strong in the support of praetorian guards and in the affection of the people at large, I would simply despise plotters. The people may vaguely admire the doctrines of the Stoics, but they themselves love pleasure and amusements and spectacles, and live upon your bounty and generosity. There can then be nothing to fear from open force. Should there be conspirators who would attempt to compass their ends by assassination, you have your guards to protect you. You have myself and my little band of countrymen ready to watch over you unceasingly. No care and caution will avail against the knife of the assassin, Nero said gloomily. It is only by striking down conspirators and assassins that one can guard oneself against their weapons. Julius Caesar was killed when surrounded by men whom he deemed his friends. Beric could not deny the truth of Nero's words. That is true, Caesar, and therefore I do not presume to criticize or even to have an opinion upon acts of state policy. These are matters utterly beyond me. I know nothing of the history of the families of Rome. I know not who may, with or without reason, deem that they have cause of complaint against you, or who may be hostile to you, either from private grievances or personal ambitions. And knowing nothing, I wish to know nothing. I desire, as I said when you first spoke to me, to be regarded as a watchdog, to be attached to you by personal kindness, and to guard you night and day against conspirators and assassins. I beseech you not to expect more from me, or to deem it possible that a Briton can be qualified to give any opinion whatever as to a matter so alien to him as the intrigues and conspiracies of an imperial city. Did I agree with you, you would soon doubt my honesty. Did I differ from you, I should incur your displeasure. Nero looked up at the frank countenance of the young Briton. "Enough," he said smilingly. "You shall be my watchdog and nothing more." As time went on, Nero's confidence in his British guard steadily increased. He had his spies, and knew how entirely Beric kept himself aloof from intimate acquaintanceships with any save the family of Norbanus, and learned, too, that he had refused many large bribes from suitors. For a time, although he knew it not, Beric was constantly watched. His footsteps were followed when he went abroad. His conversation with others in the baths, which formed the great centres of meeting and stood to the Romans in the place of modern clubs, were listened to and noted. It was observed that he seldom went to convivial gatherings, and that at any place when the conversation turned on public affairs he speedily withdrew, that he avoided all displays of wealth, dressed as quietly as it was possible for one in the court circle to do, and bore himself as simply as when he had been training in the ludus of Scopus. There he still went very frequently, practising constantly in arms with his former companions, preferring this to the more formal exercises of the gymnasium. Thus, after a time, Nero became confirmed in his opinion of Beric's straightforward honesty, and felt that there was no fear of his being tampered with by his enemies. One result of this increased confidence was that Beric's hours of leisure became much restricted, for Nero came to require his attendance whenever he appeared in public. With Beric and Boduoc among the group of courtiers that followed him, the emperor felt assured there was no occasion to fear the knife of the assassin, and it was only when he was at the baths, where only his most chosen friends were admitted, or during the long carousals that followed the suppers, that Beric was at liberty, and in the latter case Boduoc was always near at hand in case of need. Nero's precautions were redoubled after the detection of the conspiracy of Piso. That this plot was a real one, and not a mere invention of Nero to justify his designs upon those he hated and feared, is undoubted. The hour for the attempt at assassination had been fixed, the chief actor was prepared, and the knife sharpened, but the executions that followed embraced many who had no knowledge whatever of the plot. Seneca was among the victims against whom there was no shadow of proof. After the discovery of this plot, Beric found his position more and more irksome, in spite of the favour Nero showed him. Do what he would, he could not close his ears to what was public talk in Rome. The fabulous extravagances of Nero, the public and unbounded profligacy of himself and his court, the open defiance of decency, the stupendous waste of public money on the new and most sumptuous palace into which he had now removed, were matters that scandalized even the population of Rome. Senators, patricians, grave councillors, noble matrons were alike willingly or unwillingly obliged to join in the saturnalia that prevailed. The provinces were ruined to minister to the luxury of Rome. The wealth of the noblest families was sequestrated to the state. All law, order, and decency were set at defiance. To the Britons, simple in their tastes and habits, this profusion of luxury, this universal profligacy, seemed absolutely monstrous. When they met together and talked of their former life in their rude huts, it seemed that the vengeance of the gods must surely fall upon a people who seemed to have lost all sense of virtue, all respect for things human and divine. To Beric, the only laudable portion of his existence were the mornings he spent in reading and in the study of Greek with Chilton, and in the house of Norbanus. Of Lesbia he saw little. She spent her life in a whirl of dissipation and gaiety, accompanying members of her family to all the fetes in defiance of the wishes of Norbanus, whose authority in this matter she absolutely set at naught. The emperor's invitation override the authority of one who makes himself absurd by his presumption of philosophy. I live as do other Roman ladies of good family. Divorce me if you like. I have the fortune I brought you, and should prefer vastly to go my own way." This step Norbanus would have taken but for the sake of Aemilia. By his orders, the latter never went abroad with her mother or attended any of the public entertainments, but lived in the quiet society of the personal friends of Norbanus. Lesbia had yielded the point, for she did not care to be accompanied by a daughter of marriageable age, as by dint of cosmetics and paint she posed as still a young woman. Aemilia had long since recovered her spirits, and was again the merry girl Beric had known at Massilia. One day when Beric called he saw that Norbanus, who was seldom put out by any passing circumstance, was disturbed in mind. "I am troubled indeed," he said in answer to Beric's inquiry. "Lesbia has been proposing to me the marriage of Rufinus Sulla, a connection of hers, and, as you know, one of those intimates with Aemilia." Beric uttered an exclamation of anger. "He is one of the worst of profligates," he exclaimed. "I would slay him with my own hand rather than that Aemilia should be sacrificed to him." "I would slay her first," Norbanus said solemnly; "but as Lesbia threatened when I indignantly refused the proposal, Rufinus has but to ask Nero's approval, and before his orders my authority as father goes for nothing. I see but one way. It has seemed to me for a long time, Beric, that you yourself felt more warmly towards Aemilia than a mere friend. Putting aside our obligations to you for having risked your life in defence of Ennia, there is no one to whom I would more willingly give her. Had I been mistaken in your thoughts of her?" "By no means," Beric said. "I love your daughter Aemilia, but I have never spoken of her to you for two reasons. In the first place, I shall not be for some years at the age at which we Britons marry, and in the second place I am but a captive. At present I stand high in the favour of Nero, but that favour may fail me at any day, and my life at the palace is becoming unbearable. But besides, it is impossible that this orgy of crime and debauchery can continue. The vengeance of heaven cannot be much longer delayed. The legions of the provinces are utterly discontented and well nigh mutinous, and even if Rome continues to support Nero, the time cannot be far off when the legions proclaim either Galba or Vespasian or some other general as emperor, and then the downfall of Nero must come. How then could I ask you for the hand of Aemilia, a maiden of noble family, when the future is all so dark and troubled, and my own lot so uncertain? I cannot raise my sword against Caesar, for no matter his crimes, he has treated me well. Had it not been for that, I would have made Praeneste when the gladiators rose there the other day, and for the same reason I can do nothing to prepare the way for a rising here. I know the ludus of Scopus would join to a man. There is a great discontent among the other schools, for the people have become so accustomed to bloodshed that they seem steeled to all pity, and invariably give the signal for the dispatch of the conquered. As to your offer, Norbanus, I thank you with all my heart, but were it not for this danger that threatens from Rufinus, I would say that at the present time I dare not link her lot to mine. The danger is too great, the future too dark. It seems to me that the city and all in it are seized with madness, and above all, at the present time I would not for worlds take her to the palace of Nero. But if Aemilia will consent to a betrothal to me, putting off the period of marriage until the times are changed, I will with delight accept the offer of her hand, if she too is willing, for in Britain as in Gaul our maidens have a voice in their own disposal." Norbanus smiled. "Methinks, Beric, you need not fear on that score. Since the day when you fought the lion in the arena you have been her hero and the lord of her heart. Even I, although but short sighted as to matters unconnected with my work, could mark that, and I believe it is because her mother sees and fears it that she has determined to marry her to Rufinus. I will call her down to find out whether she is ready to obey my wishes." In a minute or two Aemilia came down from the women's apartments above. "My child," Norbanus said, "I have offered you in marriage to Beric. He has accepted, saving only that you must come to him not in obedience to my order, but of your own free will, since it is the custom of his country that both parties should be equally free of choice. What do you say, my child?" Aemilia had flushed with a certain glow of colour as her father began, and stood with downcast eyes until he had finished. "One moment before you decide, Aemilia," Beric said. "You know how I am situated, and that at any moment I may be involved in peril or death, that life with me can scarcely be one of ease or luxury, and that even at the best you may be an exile for ever from Rome." She looked up now. "I love you, Beric," she said. "I would rather live in a cottage with you as my lord and master than in a palace with any other. I would die with you were there need. Your wishes shall always be my law." "That is not the way in Britain," Beric said, as he drew her to him and kissed her. "The husband is not the lord of his wife. They are friends and equals, and such will we be. There is honour and respect on both sides." "It will be but your betrothal at present," Norbanus said. "Neither Beric nor I would like to see you in the palace of Caesar, but the sponsalia shall take place today, and then he can claim you when he will. Come again this evening, Beric. I will have the conditions drawn up, and some friends shall be here to witness the form of betrothal. This haste, child, is in order to give Beric power to protect you. Were you free, Rufinus might obtain an order from Nero for me to give you to him, but once the conditions are signed they cannot be broken save by your mutual consent, and moreover Beric can use his influence with the emperor on behalf of his betrothed wife, while so long as you remain under my authority you could scarcely interfere did Nero give his promise to Rufinus." "Will my mother be here?" "She will not, nor do I desire her presence," Norbanus said decidedly. "She has defied my authority and has gone her own path, and it is only for your sake that I have not divorced her. She comes and she goes as she chooses, but her home is with her family, not here. She has no right by law to a voice in your marriage. You are under my authority and mine alone. It is but right that a good mother should have an influence and a voice as to her daughter's marriage, but a woman who frequents the saturnalia of Nero has forfeited her mother's rights. It will be time enough for her to hear of it when it is too late for her to cause trouble. Now do you two go into the garden together, for I have arrangements to make." At 6 o'clock Beric returned to the house. In the atrium were gathered a number of guests. Some were members of the family of Norbanus, others were his colleagues in office. All were men of standing and family. Beric was already known to most of them, having met them at suppers at the house. When all were assembled Norbanus left the room and presently returned leading Aemilia by the hand. "My friends," he said, "you already know why you are assembled here, namely to be witnesses to the betrothal of my daughter to Beric the Briton. Vitrio, the notary, will read the conditions under which they are betrothed." The document was a formal one, and stated that Norbanus gave up his potestas or authority over his daughter Aemilia to Beric, and that he bound himself to complete the further ceremony of marriage either by the religious or civil form, as Beric might select whenever the latter should demand it, and that further he agreed to give her on her marriage the sum of 3,000 denarii, and to leave the whole of his property to her at his death, while Beric on his part bound himself to complete the ceremonies of marriage whenever called upon by Norbanus to do so, and to pay him at the present time 1,000 denarii on the consideration of his signing the present agreement, and on his delivering up to him his authority over his daughter. "You have heard this document read, Norbanus," the notary said when he had concluded the reading. "Do you assent to it, and are you ready to affix your signature to the contract?" "I am ready," Norbanus said. "And you, Beric?" "I am also ready," Beric replied. "Then do you both write your signatures here." Both signed, and 4 of the guests affixed their signatures as witnesses. Norbanus then placed Aemilia's hand in Beric's. "You are now betrothed, man and wife," he said. "I transfer to you, Beric, my authority over my daughter. Henceforth she is your property to claim as you will." A minute later there was a sudden movement at the door, and Lesbia entered in haste. "News has just been brought to me of your intention, Norbanus, and I am here to say that I will not permit this betrothal." "You have no voice or authority in the matter," Norbanus said calmly. "Legal right to interfere you never had. Your moral right you have forfeited. The conditions have been signed. Aemilia is betrothed to Beric." Lesbia broke out into passionate reproaches and threats, but Norbanus advanced a step or two towards her and said with a quiet dignity, "I have borne with you for her sake, Lesbia. Now that she belongs to Beric and not to me, I need not restrain my just indignation longer. I return your property to your hands." Lesbia stepped back as if struck. The words were the well known formula by which a Roman divorced his wife. She had not dreamed that Norbanus would summon up resolution to put this disgrace upon her, and to bring upon himself the hostility of her family. Her pride quickly came to her aid. "Thanks for the release," she said sarcastically. "Far too much of my life has already been wasted on a dotard, and my family will see that the restitution of my property is full and complete. But beware, Norbanus, I am not to be outraged with impunity, and you will learn to your cost that a woman of my family knows how to revenge herself." Then turning, she passed out the door, entered her lectica, and was carried away. "I must apologize to you, my friends," Norbanus said calmly, "for having brought you to be present at an unpleasant family scene, but I had not expected it, and know not through whom Lesbia obtained the news what was doing here. I suppose one of the slaves carried it to her, but these things trouble not a philosopher. For myself, I marvel at my long patience, and feel rejoiced that at last I shall be free to live my own life." "You have done well, Norbanus," one of his colleagues said, "though I know not what Nero will say when he hears of it, for severity among husbands is not popular at present in Rome." "I can open my veins as Seneca did," Norbanus said calmly. "Neither death nor exile have any terrors for me. Rome has gone mad, and life for a reasoning being is worthless here." "I shall represent the matter to Nero," Beric said, "and as it is seldom that I ask aught of him, I doubt not he will listen to me. When he is not personally concerned, Nero desires to act justly, and moreover, I think that he can weigh the advantages of the friendship of a faithful guard against that of his boon companions. I will speak to him the first thing in the morning. He frequently comes into the library and reads for an hour. At any rate, there is no chance of Lesbia being beforehand with me. It is too late for her to see Rufinus and get him to approach Nero tonight." "Let us talk of other matters," Norbanus said. "All these things are but transitory." He then began to talk on his favourite topic, the religions of the world, while Beric drew Aemilia, who had been weeping since the scene between her parents, into the tablinum. "It is unlucky to weep on the day of your betrothal, Aemilia. "Who could help it, Beric? Besides, as it is not for my own troubles, the omen will have no avail. But it is all so strange and so rapid. This morning I was in trouble, alarmed at what my mother told me of her intentions, fearful that my father, who has so long yielded to her, would permit her to have her own way in this also. Then came the great joy when he told me that he would give me to you, that you, who of all men I thought most of, was henceforth to be my lord. Then, just when my happiness was complete, and I was formally bound to you, came my mother. And Ennia and I always loved our father most. He was ever thoughtful and kind to us, while even as children our mother did not care for us. As we grew up she cared still less, thinking only of her own pleasures and friends, and leaving us almost wholly in charge of the slaves. But it was not until Ennia was seized as a Christian that I knew how little she loved us. Then she raved and stormed, lamented and wept, not because of the fate of Ennia, not because of the terrible death that awaited her, but because of the disgrace it brought upon herself. Even after she was brought here she scarcely came in to see her, and loudly said that it would be best for her to die. Lately, as you know, I have seen little of her. She spends all her time abroad, has defied my father's authority, and brought grief and trouble upon him. Still, to a daughter it is terrible that her mother should be divorced. Let us not think of it now, Aemilia. Your father has acted as he always does, rightly and well. I know much more of what is going on than you do, and I can tell you that Lesbia, who was so jealous of the honour of her name when Ennia was concerned, is bringing far greater dishonour upon her name by her own actions. And now let us talk of ourselves. The act you have just done, dear, may bring all sorts of sacrifices upon you. At any moment I may be a fugitive, and, as you know, the families of those who incur Nero's wrath share in their disgrace, and if I am forced to fly, you too may be obliged to become a fugitive." She looked up brightly. "I shall not mind any hardships I suffer for your sake, Beric. Rome is hateful to me since Ennia stood in the arena. I would rather share a hut with you among the savage mountains of the north than a palace here. I trust that trouble is still far distant, but I shall, as soon as I can, find a release where, in case I fall under Nero's displeasure, you can lie hid until I can send for you. I have such a retreat, Beric. Since Ennia's death I have seen a good deal of the Christians. Lycoris, you know, was captured at the same time as Ennia and was put to death by fire. But her daughter, married to a freedman who has purchased her liberty from my father, managed to escape with her husband when the place was surrounded. I have met her several times since. She and her husband are living hidden in the catacombs, where she tells me many of their sect have taken refuge from the persecutions. The last time I saw her she said to me, 'No one's life is safe in this terrible city, and none, however high in station, can say that they may not require a refuge. Should you need an asylum, Aemilia, go to the house of a freedman, one Minquus, living in the third house on the right of the street known as the Narrow One, close behind the amphitheatre at the foot of the Palatine Hill, and knock thrice at the door. When they open, say, in the name of Christ, then they will take you in. Tell them that you desire to see me, and that you are the sister of Ennia, the daughter of Norbanus, and they will lead you to us. There is an entrance to the catacombs under the house. As the sister of Ennia you will be warmly received by all there, even although you yourself may not belong to us. The galleries and the passages are of vast extent, and known only to us. There is no fear of pursuit here." "That is good news, Aemilia. It is sad that, but an hour betrothed, we are forced to think of refuges. But it will be happiness to me to know that if danger threatens you have a place of retreat. You see this ring? Nero himself gave it to me. Mark it well, so that you may know it again. It is a figure of Mercury carved on an amethyst, When you receive it by night or day, tarry not a moment, but wrap yourself in a sombre mantle like that of a slave, and hie you to this refuge you speak of. But first see your father. Tell him where you are going and why, so that he may fly too if he chooses." "He will not do that," Aemilia said, "and how can I leave him?" "You must leave him because you belong to me, Aemilia, and because you are acting on my orders. The danger to you is far greater than to him. You are my wife, he only my father-in-law, and they would strike at me first through you. Besides, there are other reasons. Your father is a Roman of the old type, and like Seneca and Plautus and others of the same school, will deem it no loss when the time comes to quit life. However, you will tell him of the danger, and he must make his own choice. I shall beg him to hand to you at once the money which I placed in his care now a year ago. Do you hand it over to the woman you speak of, and ask her to hide it away in the caves till you ask for it again. These Christians are to be trusted. I have much money besides, for Nero is lavishly generous, and it would anger him to refuse his bounty. This money I have placed in several hands, some in Rome, some elsewhere, so that if forced to fly I can at any rate obtain some of my store without having to run into danger." "One more question, Beric. Should I ever have to take refuge among the Christians, and like Ennia come to love their doctrines, would you be angered if I joined their sect? If you would, I will not listen to them, but will tell them that I cannot talk or think of these things without my husband's consent." "You are free to do as you like, Aemilia. Since Ennia died I have resolved upon the first opportunity to study the doctrines of these people, for truly it must be a wonderful religion that enables those who profess it to meet a cruel death, not only without fear but with joy. You know Ennia said we should meet again, and I think she meant that I too should become a Christian. Ask the woman if I also, as a last resource, may take refuge among them." "I will ask her, Beric, but I am sure they will gladly receive you. Have you not already risked your life to save a Christian?" The other guests having now left, Norbanus joined them, and Beric told him of the arrangements they had made in case of danger. He warmly approved of them. "It will be a relief to me as to you, Beric, to know that Aemilia's safety is provided for. As for myself, fate has no terrors for me, but for you and her it is different. She is yours now, for although but betrothed, she is virtually your wife. You have but to take her by the hand and to declare her your wife in the presence of witnesses, and all is done. There is, it is true, a religious ceremony in use only among the wealthier classes, but this is rather an occasion for pomp and feasting, and is by no means needful, especially as you have no faith in the Roman gods. What are the rites among your own people, Beric?" "We simply take a woman by the hand and declare her our wife. Then there is feasting, and the bride is carried home, and there is the semblance of a fight, the members of her family making a show of preventing us, but this is no part of the actual rite, which is merely public assent on both sides. And now I must be going. Nero will be feasting for a long time yet, but Boduoc, who has been on guard for many hours, and I must relieve him. Farewell, Norbanus. We have been preparing for the worst, but I trust we shall escape misfortune. Farewell, my Aemilia," and kissing her tenderly, Beric strode away to the palace of Nero. He had not seen Boduoc since early morning, and the latter, standing on guard outside the private entrance to Nero's apartments, greeted his arrival. "Why, Beric, I began to fear that some harm had befallen you. I came in this morning after the bath and found you had gone out. I returned again at 6 and found your chamber again empty, but saw that you had returned during my absence. I went on guard, and here I have been for 4 hours listening to all that foolish singing and laughter inside. How Caesar, who has the world at his command, can spend his time with actors and buffoons is more than I can understand. But what has kept you?" As there was no fear of his voice being heard through the heavy hangings, Beric, to Boboic's intense surprise, related the events of the day. "So you have married a Roman girl, Beric? Well, I suspected what would come of it when you spent half your time at the house of Norbanus. I would rather that you had married one of our own maidens, but as I see no chance of our return to Britain for years, if ever, one could hardly expect you to wait for that. At any rate, she is the best of the Roman maidens I have seen. She neither dyes her hair nor paints her face, and although she lacks stature, she is comely and is always bright and pleasant when I have accompanied you there. I am inclined to feel half jealous that you have another to love you beside myself, but I will try and not grudge her a share of your affection. Well, hand me your sword, Boduoc, and betake yourself to your bed. I will remain on guard for the next 4 hours, or until the feasting is over. Nero often opens the hangings the last thing to see if we are watchful, and he likes to see me at my post. I wish to find him in a good temper in the morning." The next morning, to Beric's satisfaction, Nero came into the library early. Chiton, as was his custom, retired at once. "I was inspired last night, Beric," the emperor said. "Listen to these verses I composed at the table," and he recited some stanzas in praise of wine. "I am no great judge of these matters, Caesar," Beric said, "but they seem to me to be admirable indeed. How could it be otherwise, when even the Greeks awarded you the crown for your recitations at their contest? Yesterday was a fortunate day for me also, Caesar, for Norbanus betrothed his daughter to me." The emperor's face clouded, and Beric hastened to say, "There is no talk of marriage at present, Caesar, for marriage would interfere with my duties to you. Therefore, it is only when you have no longer an occasion for my services that the betrothal will be converted into a marriage. My first duty is to you, and I shall allow nothing to interfere with that." Nero's face cleared. "That is right," he said graciously. "You might have married better, seeing that you enjoy my favour, but perhaps it is as well as it is. Norbanus is a worthy man and a good official, although his ideas are old fashioned. But it is reported of him that he thinks of nothing but his work, and mixes himself up in no way in politics, living the life almost of a recluse. It was one of his daughters you championed in the arena. She died soon afterwards, I heard. Has he other children?" "Only the maiden I am betrothed to, Caesar, for his wife has long been altogether separated from him, being devoted to gaiety and belonging to a family richer and more powerful than his, and looking down upon her husband as a mere bookworm. He has borne with her neglect and disobedience to his wishes for a long time, and has shown, as it seemed to me, far too great a weakness in exerting his authority. But his patience has at last failed, and when yesterday, in defiance of him, she would have interfered to prevent my betrothal to his daughter, he divorced her." "Divorce is the fashion," Nero said carelessly. "I know his wife Lesbia. She has frequently been present with members of her family at my entertainments. She is a fine woman, and I wonder not that she and the recluse her husband did not get on well together. She will soon be consoled. I have mentioned it to you, Caesar, because she is a revengeful woman, and might cause rumours unfavourable to her husband to be reported to you. He is the most simple and single-minded of men, and his thoughts are entirely occupied, as you say, with the duties of his office and with the learned book upon which he has long been engaged. But although a philosopher in his habits, he holds aloof from all parties, and even in his own family never discusses public affairs. Had it been otherwise, you may be sure that I, your Majesty's attendant and guard, should have abstained from visiting his house." "I know this to be the case, Beric. Naturally, when I first placed you near my person, I was interested in knowing who were your intimates, and caused strict inquiries to be made as to the household of Norbanus and his associates. All that I heard was favourable to him, and convinced me that he was in no way a dangerous person." Nero left the room and returned shortly bearing a casket. "Give these jewels to your betrothed, Beric, as a present from Caesar to the wife of his faithful guard." Beric thanked the emperor in becoming terms, and in the afternoon carried the jewels, which were of great value, to Aemilia. "They are a fortune in themselves," he said. "In case of danger take them from the casket and conceal them in your garments." No one could have been more cordial than Nero was this morning, but he is fickle as the wind, and when Rufinus and others of his boon companions obtain his ear, his mood may change altogether. Chapter 18: The Outbreak. It was not long, indeed, before Beric found that hostile influences were at work. Nero was not less friendly in his manner, but he more than once spoke to him about Aemilia. "I hear," he said one day, "that your betrothed is very beautiful, Beric." "She is very fair, Caesar," Beric replied coldly. "I know not how it is that I have not seen her at court," Nero continued. "Her tastes are like those of her father," Beric said. "She goes but seldom abroad, and has long had the principal care of her father's household." "But you should bring her now," Nero persisted. "The wife of one of the officials of the palace should have a place at our entertainments." "She is not at present my wife, Caesar. She is but my betrothed, and as you have yourself excused me from attendance at all entertainments, it would be unseemly for her, a Roman maiden, though betrothed to me, to appear there." "There are plenty of other Roman maidens who appear there," Nero said pettishly. Beric made no reply, and the subject was not again alluded to at that time. But the emperor returned to it on other occasions, and Beric at last was driven to refuse point blank. "I am your majesty's guard," he said. "I watch you at night as well as by day, and as I have told your majesty, I cannot perform my duties properly if I have to be present at your entertainments. I should not permit my wife or my betrothed to be present in public unless I was by her side. Your majesty took me for what I was, a simple Briton who could be relied upon as a guard, because I had neither friends nor family in Rome, and was content to live a simple and quiet life. I am willing to abstain from marriage in order that I may still do my service as heretofore, but if I have to attend entertainments you cannot rely upon my constant vigilance. It is for you to choose, Caesar, whether you most require vigilant guards, who could be trusted as standing aloof from all, or the addition of 2 persons to the crowds you entertain. I am sure, Caesar," he went on as the emperor made no reply, "it is not yourself who is now speaking to me. It is Rufinus, formerly a suitor for the hand of the daughter of Norbanus, who has been whispering into your ear and abusing the favour you show him. He dare not show his animosity to me openly, for one who has conquered a lion would make but short work of him. Your majesty, I pray you, let not the word of men like this come between yourself and one you know to be faithful to you." "You are right, Beric," Nero said. "I will press you no further. It was but a passing thought. I had heard of the beauty of your betrothed, and thought I would see if she were as fair as report makes her, but since you do not wish it to be so, it shall not be spoken of again." But Beric knew enough of Nero to be aware that, like most weak men, he was obstinate, and that Rufinus and his friends would not allow the matter to drop. Every preparation was therefore made for sudden flight. Aemilia was warned on no account to trust any message she might receive purporting to be from him, and the Britons in the palace, who were heartily sick of their monotonous duty, were told to hold themselves in readiness for action. Beric knew that he could depend on the slave who had been assigned to him as an attendant. He was not the man who had at first served him, and who, as Beric doubted not, had acted as a spy upon him. When it was found that there was nothing to discover, this man had been removed for other work, and a slave boy of some 17 years old had taken his place. To him Beric had behaved with great kindness, and the lad was deeply attached to him. He had several times taken notes and messages to the house of Norbanus, and Beric told Aemilia that when it became necessary to send her the ring, he should probably entrust it to him. A week later Boduoc was on guard at 10 in the evening. In the distant banqueting hall he could hear sounds of laughter and revelry, and knowing the natures of these feasts, he muttered angrily to himself that he, a Briton, should be standing there while such things were being done within. Suddenly he heard a step approaching the hangings. They were drawn back, and one of the court attendants said, "Caesar requires the attendance of Beric the Briton in the banqueting hall." "I will tell him," Boduoc said. "He will come directly." Beric was sitting reading when Boduoc entered and gave him the message. "This means mischief, Boduoc," he said. "I have never been sent for before to one of these foul carousals. Philo, come hither." The lad, who was lying on a mat by the door, rose. "Philo, take this ring. Follow me to the door of the banqueting room and stand behind the hangings. If I say run, Philo, carry out the orders that I have before given you. Speed first to the room where the Britons sleep, and tell them to arm and come up by the private stairs to my room instantly. They know the way. They are then to pass on through the passage and the next room and wait behind the hangings, when Boduoc will give them orders. Directly you have given my message, speed to the house of Norbanus and demand in my name to see the lady Aemilia. If she has retired to her room, she must be roused. If the slaves make difficulty, appeal to Norbanus himself. He will fetch her down to you. Give her this ring and say the time is come." "I will do it, my lord. Where am I to join you afterwards?" "I shall take the road to Olman hills first. I think that if you are speedy you may be on the Alban road before me. Now follow me, Boduoc. Do come as far as the hangings of the banquet hall and stand there with Philo. You will be able to hear what passes within. Do not enter unless I call you. Bring my sword with you." Beric passed through 2 or 3 large apartments and then entered the banqueting hall. It was ablaze with lights. A dozen men and as many women in the scantiest costumes lay on couches along each side of the table. All were crowned with chaplets of flowers, and were half covered with roses, of which showers had fallen from above upon them. Nero lay on a couch at the end of the table. His features were flushed with wine. Beric repressed the exclamation of indignant disgust that rose to his lips, and walked calmly up to Nero, said coldly, "I am told that you want me, Caesar." "I do, my fighter of lions," Nero said unsteadily. "I would see this paragon of whom Rufinus tells me, whom you guard so jealously from my eyes. Send and fetch her hither. She will be a worthy queen of our revels." "It is an honour to me to obey your majesty's commands in all matters that regard myself," Beric said, "but in regard to my promised wife, no. This is no place for a Roman lady, and even at the risk of your displeasure, Caesar, I refuse to dishonour her by bringing her into such assembly." "I told you he would refuse, Caesar." Rufinus, who was lying on the couch next to Nero, laughed. Nero was speechless with surprise and anger at Beric's calm refusal to obey his orders. "Do I understand," he said at last, "that you refuse to obey me?" "I do, Caesar. It is not a lawful command, and I distinctly refuse to obey it." "Then, by the gods, your life is forfeit," Nero said, rising to his feet. "You may thank your God, Caesar, that I have more sense of honour than you. Were it otherwise I would strike you dead at my feet. But a British chief disdains to fight an armed foe, and I, who have eaten your bread and taken your wages, am doubly bound not to lift my hand against you." Then he lifted his voice and cried, "Run, Philo!" The revellers by this time had all started to their feet. Nero, shrinking backwards behind them, calling loudly for help. Rufinus, who had shown bravery in the wars, drew a dagger from beneath his toga and sprang at Beric. The latter caught his uplifted wrist, and with a sharp wrench forced him to drop the weapon. Then he seized him in his grasp. "You shall do no more mischief, Rufinus," he said, raising him in his arms, hurled him with tremendous force against the marble pillar, where he fell inert and lifeless, his skull being completely beaten in by the blow. The hall rang with the shrieks of women and the shouts of men. There were sounds of heavy footsteps, and 8 of the Praetorian guards with drawn swords ran in on the other side of the chamber. "Boduoc!" Beric shouted, and in a moment his followers stood beside him and handed him his sword and buckler. "Kill him!" Nero shouted frantically. "The traitor would have slain me." Beric and Boduoc stepped back to the door from which they had entered and awaited the onset of Praetorians. For a moment these hesitated, for Beric's figure was well known in the palace, and not one of them but had heard of his encounter with the lion. The emperor's shouts, however, overcame their reluctance, and shoulder to shoulder they rushed forward to the attack. 2 fell instantly, helmet and head cloven by the swords of the Britons, who at once took the offensive and drove the others before them, slaying 3 more and putting the others to flight. But the success was temporary, for now a great body of the guard poured into the room. "Step back through the doorway, Boduoc," Beric said. Their numbers would not avail them then. The doors were 10 feet in width. This gave room to but 3 men to enter at once and use their arms to advantage, and for 2 or 3 minutes the Britons kept the Praetorians at bay, 8 of them having fallen beneath their blows. Then there was a shout, and the Roman soldiers came running in at a door at the end of the chamber. "Fall back to the next door," Beric said, but as he spoke there was a rush behind, and 19 Britons ran into the room, and uttering the war cry of the Iceni, flung themselves upon the Roman soldiers. These, taken by surprise at the sudden appearance of these tall warriors, and ignorant of what further reinforcements might be coming up, gave ground and were speedily beaten back, a score of them falling beneath the Britons' swords. "Now retreat!" Beric cried as the room was cleared. "Retreat at full speed. Show them the way, Boduoc, by the staircase down into the garden. Quick, there is not a moment to lose. I will guard the rear." They ran down the passage, through Beric's room, down a long corridor, and then by stairs leading thence into the garden, which was indeed a park of considerable size, with lakes, shrubberies, and winding walks. The uproar in the palace was no longer heard by the time they were halfway across the park, but they ran at full speed until they reached a door in the wall. Of this Beric had some time before obtained a key from the head gardener, and always carried this about with him. As they stopped they looked back towards the palace. Distant shouts could be heard, and the lights of numbers of torches could be seen spreading out in all directions. Beric opened the door and locked it behind him when all had passed out. "Now," he said to his companions, "make your way down to the road leading out to the Alban hills. Break up and go singly, so that you may not be noticed. It will be a good half an hour before the news of what has occurred is known beyond the palace. Do not pass through the frequented streets, but move along the dark lanes as much as possible. When half a mile beyond the city we will reunite." An hour later the whole party was gathered beyond the city. All were delighted to escape from what they considered slavery, and the fact that they had again bucklers on their arms and swords by their sides made them feel as if their freedom were already obtained. "This puts one in mind of old times," Boduoc said joyously. "One might think we were about to start on an expedition in the Fens. Well, they have taught us all somewhat more than we knew before, and we will show them that the air of Rome has robbed us of none of our strength. Where go we now, Beric?" "First to the ludus of Scopius. I learned a week since that he has taken his band out again to the Olman hills for the hot season. I believe that most of his men will join us, if not all. As soon as the news is spread that we are in arms, we could, if we wished it, be joined by scores of gladiators from other schools. There are hundreds who would, if the standards of revolt were raised, prefer dying fighting in the open to being slain to gratify a Roman mob. Aye, that there are, but put in another of the band. I have never ceased to lament that I did not fall that day on our island in the Vents. Think you there will be pursuit, Beric? Another asked. No, the first thought of Nero will be to assemble all the Praetorians for his protection. They will search the palace and the park, expecting attack rather than thinking of pursuit. In the morning, when they find that all is quiet, and that it is indeed only us with whom there is trouble, they will doubtless send parties of searchers over the country, but long before that we shall be a day's march ahead. My wish is to gain the mountains. I do not want to head a great rebellion against Rome. Disaster would surely come of it at last, and I should have only led men to their death. 100 men is the outside number I will take. With that number we may live as outlaws among the mountains to the south. We could move so rapidly that large forces could not follow us, and be strong enough to repulse small ones. There is plenty of game among the hills. We should live as we did at home, chiefly by hunting. Just as they were approaching the hills, a quick step was heard behind them, and the lad Philo ran up. Ah, you have overtaken us, Philo. 'Tis well, lad, for your life would have been forfeited had you stayed in Rome. Well, he asked, drawing him aside, you saw the Lady Aemilia? What said she? She said, tell my lord that I obey, but that I pray to let me join him and share his dangers if it be possible. But be it tomorrow or 5 years hence, he will find me waiting for him at the place he knows of. Norbanus was present when she spoke. I told him what I had heard in the banqueting room, and he said, Beric has done rightly. Tell him that he has acted as a Roman should do, but as Romans no longer act, caring less for their honour than do the meanest slaves, and that I thank him for having thus defended my daughter against indignity. He was glad, he said, that his life would end now, for it was a burden to him under such conditions. He gave me this bag of gold to bring to you, saying that he should have no further need for it, and that, leaving in such haste, you would not have time to furnish yourself with money. It is heavy, the boy said. I should have caught you some time earlier, but 20 or more pounds weight makes a deal of difference in a long run. On arriving at the house of Scopus, Beric bade the others wait without, and stepping over the slaves lying at the entrance, he went quietly to the sleeping chamber of the lanista. Who is this? Scopus asked as he entered. It is I, Beric. Throw your mantle on and come outside with me, Scopus. I would speak with you alone, and do not wish that all should know that I have been here. In trouble? Scopus asked as they left the house. Aye, lad, I expected it, and knew that sooner or later it would come. What is it? Nero ordered me to fetch Aemilia to his foul carousal. I refused. Rufinus, at whose instigation he acted, attacked me. I hurled him against a pillar, and methinks he was killed. And then Nero, in alarm for his life, called for the Praetorians. Boduoc and my countrymen joined me, and we slew some 30 of them. Then made our escape and are taking to the mountains. Have you come to ask my gladiators to join? Scopus said shortly. No, Beric replied. When I started, I thought of so doing, but as I walked hither I decided otherwise. It would not be fair to you. Did I ask them, some would join, I know, others might not. The loss of their services I could make up to you. But if it were known that we had been here, and that some of your band had joined me, Nero's vengeance would fall on you all. I thank you, Beric. If some went, I must go myself, for I dare not remain, and though I wish you well, and hate the tyrant, I am well off and comfortable, and have no desire to throw away my life. There is one I should like to take with me, Porus, We were good friends when I was here, and I know that he hates this life and longs to be free from it. He would have run away and joined the gladiators when they rose at Praeneste had I not dissuaded him. He could leave without the others knowing it, and in the morning you might affect the belief that he had run away, and give notice to the magistrate here, and have him sought for. In that way there would be no suspicion of his joining us. I know that he is valuable to you, being, I think, the best of your troop, but I will pay you whatever price you place his services at." "No, no," Scopus said. "I will give him to you, Beric, for the sake of our friendship and for your consideration for me in not taking the rest with you. I have done well by you and him. Stay here and I will fetch him out for you. It may be that many will desert both from me and the other Lanisti when they hear that you have taken to the mountains, but for that I cannot be blamed. You have come far out of your way to come hither." "Yes, 'tis a long detour, but it will matter little. We shall skirt around the foot of the hills, cross the Liris below Praeneste, and then make straight to the mountains. They will not search for us in that direction, and we will take shelter in a wood when day breaks, and gain the mountains tomorrow night. Once there we shall be safe, and shall move further south to the wild hills between Apulia and Campania, or, if it is too hot for us there, down into Bruttium, whence we can, if it be needed, cross into Sicily. I am not thinking of making war with Rome. We intend to live and die as freemen, and methinks that in the mountains we may laugh at the whole strength of Rome. You will find plenty of others in the same condition there, Beric. Escaped slaves and gladiators constantly make for the hills, and there have been many expeditions against the bands there, who are often strong enough to be a danger to the towns near the foot of the mountains. We are not going to turn brigands," Beric said. "This is game on the hill. There is game on the hills, and we are all hunters, and I have money enough to pay for all else we require did we live there for years. But fetch me Porus. We must be far from here by daylight." Porus soon came out, much surprised at being suddenly roused from sleep, and silently brought out of the house by Scopus. As soon as Beric explained to him what had happened, he joyfully agreed to join him, and stole in and fetched his arms. Then, with a heavy adieu to Scopus, Beric placed himself at the head of his band and struck off by the road to Praeneste. Walking fast, they arrived at the bank of the Liris before daybreak. Crossing the river in a fisherman's boat they found on the bank, and just as daylight showed in the sky, entered an extensive grove, having walked over 40 miles since leaving Rome. They slept during the day, taking it by turns to watch at the edge of the wood, and when it was again dark started afresh, and were, when morning broke, high up on the slopes of the Apennines. "I feel a free man now," Boduoc said. "It does not seem to me that I have drawn a breath of fresh air since I entered Rome. But fresh air, good as it is, Beric, is not altogether satisfying, and I begin to feel that I have eaten nothing since I supped the day before yesterday." "We will push on for another hour," Beric said, "and then we shall be fairly beyond the range of cultivation. At the last house we come to we will go in and purchase food. Flour is the principal thing we need. We shall have no difficulty in getting goats from the herdsmen who pasture their animals among the hills." An hour later Beric, with Boduoc and 2 of his followers, went up to a farmhouse. The farmer and his servants ran into the house, raising cries of alarm at the sight of 4 tall armed figures. "Do not fear," Beric said when he reached the door. "We are not brigands, but honest men who desire to pay for what we need." Somewhat reassured, the farmer came out. "What does my lord require?" he asked, impressed by a nearer view of Beric's dress and arms. "How much flour have you in the house?" Beric asked, "and what is the price of it?" The farmer had 3 sacks of flour. "I will take them all," Beric said, "and 3 skins of wine if you have them. I will also buy 2 sheep if you name me a fair price for the whole." The farmer named a price not much above that which he would have obtained in the market, and Beric also brought him a number of small bags capable of containing some 15 or 20 pounds of flour each. Then one of the men fetched up the rest of the band, and the flour was divided and packed into small bags. The sheep were killed and cut up. 3 of the men lifted the wine skins on their shoulders, the rest took the flour and meat, and they marched away, leaving the farmer and his family astounded at the appearance of these strange men with fair hair and blue eyes, and of a stature that appeared to them gigantic. Still ascending the mountain, the band halted in a forest. Wood was soon collected and a fire lighted. The contents of one of the bags was made into dough at a stream hard by, divided into cakes, and placed on red hot ashes, while the meat was cut up and hung over the fire. "We have forgotten drinking horns," Beric said, "but your steel cap, Horace, will serve us for a drinking cup for today." After a hearty meal they lay down for some hours to sleep, and then resumed their march. They were getting well into the heart of the mountains when a figure suddenly appeared on a crag above them. "Who are you?" he shouted, "and what do you here in the mountains?" "We are fugitives from the tyranny of Rome," Beric replied. "We mean harm to no man, but those who would meddle with us are likely to regret it." "You swear that you are fugitives?" the man called back. "I swear," Beric said, holding up his hand. The man turned round and spoke to someone behind him, and a moment later a party of 15 men appeared on a crag and began to descend into the ravine up which Beric's band were making their way. "It is the Britons!" the leader exclaimed as he neared them. "Why, Beric, it is you! Tired already of the dignities of Rome? How fares it with you, Boduoc?" Beric recognized at once a Gaul, one of the gladiators of Scopus, who had some months before fled from the ludus. In a minute the two bands met. Most of the newcomers were Gauls, and, like their leader, escaped gladiators, and as Beric's name was well known to all, they saluted him with acclamations. Both parties were pleased at the meeting, for, akin by race and speaking dialects of the same language, they regarded each other as natural allies. "The life of an outlaw will be a change to you after Nero's palace, Beric," Gatho, their leader, said. "A pleasant change," Beric replied. "I have no taste for gilded chains. How do you fare here, Gatho?" "There are plenty of wild boars among the mountains. We can always get a goat when they are lacking. There are plenty of them wild all over the hills, escaped captives like ourselves. As for wine and flour, we have occasionally to make a raid on the villages." "I do not propose to do that," Beric said. "I have money to buy what we require, and if we set the villagers against us, sooner or later they will lead the troops after us up the mountains." "I would gladly do that too, but the means are lacking. We owe the peasants no ill will, but one must live, you know. Have you any place you make your headquarters? An hour's march from hence I will lead you to it." The united bands continued to climb the hills, and on emerging from the ravine Gatho led them for some distance along the upper edge of the forest. Then he turned up a narrow gorge in the hillside with a little rivulet running down it. The ravine widened out as they went up, till they reached a spot where it formed a circular area of some 150 feet in diameter, surrounded on all sides by perpendicular rocks, with a tiny cascade 100 feet in height falling into it at the farther end. Some rough huts of boughs of trees were erected near the centre. "A good hiding place," Beric said, "but I see no mode of retreat, and if a peasant were to lead a party of Romans to the entrance, you would be caught in a trap." "We have only been here 10 days," Gatho said, "and never stopped long in one place, but it has the disadvantage you speak of. However, we have always 1 or 2 men posted lower down at points where they can see any bodies of men ascending the hills. They brought us notice of your coming when you were far below, so you see we are not likely to be taken by surprise, and the Roman soldiers are not fond of night marches along the mountains." As it was some hours since the Britons had partaken of their meal, they were quite ready to join the Gauls in another, and the carcass of a wild boar hanging up near the huts was soon cut up and roasting over a fire, the Britons contributing wine and flour to the meal. After it was over there was a long talk, and after consulting together Gatho and his band unanimously agreed in asking Beric to take command of the whole party. "We all know you, Beric," Gatho said. "None could like you have fought a lion barehanded, and I know that there was no one in the ludus who was your match with the sword, while Boduoc and the other five were infinitely superior to any of us in strength. Besides, you are well versed in Roman ways, and have led an army against them. Therefore, we are all ready to accept you as our leader, and to obey your orders if you will take us." "I will do so willingly, Gatho. I do not wish to have more than 50 men with me, for it would be difficult to find sustenance for a larger number. 100 is the outside number, and doubtless we shall be able to gather other recruits should we choose to raise the band to that number. But all who follow me must obey me as implicitly as did my own tribesmen in our struggle with the Romans, and must swear to do no harm to innocent people, and to abstain from all violence and robbery. I am ready to be a leader of outlaws, but not a brigand. I desire only to live a free life among the mountains. If the Romans come against us, we will fight against them, and the spoil we may take from them is lawful booty, to be used in exchange for such things as we may require. But with the peasants we will make friends, and if we treat them well they will bring us news of any expeditions that may be afoot for our capture. As I have said, I have money enough to buy everything we want at present, and can obtain more if necessary, so that there is no reason for us to rob these poor people of their goods. Here we are too near Rome for them to be disaffected, but further south we should find them not unwilling to aid us, for the provinces are ground into the dust by the exactions necessary to pay for the cost of the rebuilding of Rome and to support the extravagance of Nero." The Gauls cheerfully took the required oath. "You, Gatho, will continue to act as my lieutenant with your Gauls. Boduoc commands the Britons under me. It may be necessary at times for the band to divide, as when game is scarce we may find a difficulty in keeping together, especially if we recruit our band up to 100. I am determined to have no malefactors who have fled from justice, nor riotous men among us. I should prefer that they should be chiefly your countrymen, but we will not refuse gladiators of other nations who have been captured as prisoners of war. We want no escaped slaves among us. A man who has once been a slave might try to buy his pardon and freedom by betraying us. We will be free men all, asking only to live in freedom among the mountains, injuring none, but determined to fight and die in defence of that freedom." These sentiments were warmly welcomed by the Gauls. The next day the number of men on the lookout was increased, and the band, breaking up into small parties, scattered among the mountains in pursuit of wild boars and goats. Some were to return successful or not at night to the encampment, and on the following day to take the place of those on watch, and relays were provided so that during the week each would take a turn at that duty. Never did men enjoy a week's hunting with greater zest than the Britons. To them life seemed to begin anew, and although the skies were bluer and the mountains higher and rougher than those of Britain, it seemed to them that they were once again enjoying their native air, and of an evening rude chants of Gaul and Britain echoed among the rocks. Porus the Syrian stood somewhat apart from the rest, not understanding the tongue of the others, and he therefore became naturally the special companion of Beric, for having been 6 years in Rome he spoke Latin fluently. "It is I who must go down to get you news, Beric," he said one day. "You Britons could not disguise yourselves, for even if you stained your cheeks and dyed your hair, your blue eyes and your height would betray you at once. The Gauls too, though shorter than you, are still much taller and broader men than the Romans, and there are none of them who speak the language well enough to ask a question without their foreign tongue being detected. I am about the height of the Romans, and am swarthier than the Gauls, and could, if I borrowed the dress of one of the goatherds, pass among them without notice. It would certainly be well, as you were saying, to know what is being done below, and whether there is any idea of sending troops up into the mountains to search for us. You may be sure that after the scare you gave Nero and the defeat of his guards, the matter will not be allowed to drop, and that they will search all Italy for you. I should think that at first they will seek for you in the north, thinking that you would be likely after taking to the hills, which you would be sure to do, for such a party could never hope to traverse the plains unnoticed. To keep among the chain to the north, cross the Cisalpine plains, and try the passage of the great mountains. At any rate, it will be well, Porus, to know what they are doing. If they are at present confining their search to the northern range, we can stay where we are with confidence. I should be sorry to move, for we are well placed here. There is good water and game is abundant. We certainly shall soon lack wine, but for everything else we can manage. We have meat in abundance, and have flour to last for some time, for both we and the Gauls eat but little bread. Besides, if pushed, we can do as the peasants do, pound up acorns and beech nuts and make a sort of bread of them. Very well, Beric, I will go down tomorrow. Early in the morning, however, two of the men on sentry came in and said that they observed the glitter of the sun on spearhead and armour far down the hillside. "If they are after us," Beric said, "as I expect they are, they have doubtless learned that we are somewhere in this part of the mountain from the man of whom we brought the wine and flour. I don't suppose he intended to do us harm, but when he went down to purchase fresh supplies he may well have mentioned that a party of strong men of unusual height and with fair hair had brought up his stock, paying for it honestly, which would perhaps surprise him more than anything. If the news had come to the ears of any of the officials, they, knowing the hue and cry which was being made for us, would have sent word at once to Praeneste or Rome. We must at once recall that those who are away. Philo, take a couple of brands and go and light the signal fire." A pile of dry wood had been placed in readiness upon a projecting rock a mile away, and standing in position where it was visible from a considerable extent of the hillside. It had been settled that the parties of hunters who did not return at nightfall should occasionally send one of their number to a point whence he could get a view of the beacon. "Directly the pile is well alight, Philo, pluck up green bushes and tufts of grass and throw upon it, so as to make as much smoke as possible." There were 18 men in the encampment and 4 out on guard. Boduoc and Gatho were both away, and as soon as Philo had started with the brands, Beric and Porus set out with the 2 scouts. "That was where we saw them," one of them said, pointing far down the hillside, "but by this time they will have no doubt entered the wooded belt." "We must find out something about their numbers," Beric said. "Not that I wish to fight, for were we to inflict losses upon them they would more than ever make efforts to overtake us. Still, it would be as well to know what force they may think sufficient to capture us." "I will go down through the forest," Porus said. "Doubtless they will have some light armed troops with the spearmen, but they must be fleet indeed if they overtake me after all my training. Do not let them see you if you can help it, Porus, or they will follow close behind you, although they might not overtake you, and that might bring on a fight." "I will be careful," and leaving the buckler behind him, Porus started on his way down the mountain. In an hour and a half he returned. "I have had a good view of them," he said. They have halted at the place where we got the flour. There are 100 heavy armed troops and 100 archers and slingers." "They have come in strength," Beric said. "It shows that they do not hold the Britons cheaply. We will return at once to the camp. By this time the hunters should be back." Sending one of the men to call in the other sentries, they returned to the huts. Boduoc with a party of 10 men had already come in, and said that they had seen Gatho's party making their way down from a point high up on the mountains. "We will pause no longer," Beric said. "We shall meet them as they descended. Take the flour and what little wine remains, and let us be going. Scatter the fire and extinguish the brands. Unless they have found some goatherd who has marked us coming and going, they may not find this place. I hope they will not do so, as it would encourage them by the thought that they had nearly captured us." The party had ascended the mountain half a mile when they met Gatho returning. "I like not to retreat without fighting," he said, when he had heard from Beric of the coming of the Romans and their force, "but I agree with you that it is better not to anger them further. I want 3 of the fleetest footed of your men, Gatho, to stay behind with Porus and watch them, themselves unseen. We will cross over the crest of the hills to the eastern side. Porus, do you mark that tall crag near the summit? You will find one of us there, and he will lead you to our camping place. I want to know whether the Romans, after spending the day searching the hills, go back through the forest, or whether they encamp here. In the one case we can return, in the other it would be better to move south at once. We could laugh at their heavy armed spearmen, but their archers and slingers carry no more weight than we do, and would harass us sorely with their missiles, which we have no means of returning." As soon as the men to remain with Porus were chosen, the rest of the band proceeded on their way.